Hello YouTube, in this video I'm going to be discussing the issue with novice programs. I was going to say most of them, but in reality it's all of them because I have yet to discover one that fits my criteria, and that's the reason why I made mine. And I'll discuss the differences between the way I do it and the way YouTube Fitness as a whole has been doing it for close to a decade now. So, when we talk about novice programs, the reason why they're so important is because they are the first exposition that young lifters, noobs in general, get to the heart of programming. It's the first time that they see a training put on paper and that they finally understand that to make long-term progress, you're going to have to follow a plan. And that's, first off, excellent, of course, because you introduce them to the notion of discipline and rigorous programming that is quintessential. It's too easy for novices to get sucked into the atmosphere of the gym and to just do whatever. I know what I'm talking about. I used to do that. I used to go to the gym and I had a vague idea of what I was going to do on that day, but I would do whatever. One day I would do a machine, one day I would do some bench press. And what that does is you never get good at the lift, you never adapt neurologically to the lift, and you just never progress. You feel like you're progressing because you're cycling all of those machines, but in reality you're not. And that can completely destroy your love for bodybuilding and lifting because you see no results. So novice programs and programs in general are essential. But, there's a big but, the quality of novice programs, even the one that most everyone jumped on, is poor. And across the board, they all tend to have the same issues. So I'm going to discuss it with you today because if we want the next generation of lifters to excel and surpass what we have done, we need to help them and we need to propose a renewal of novice programs that is going to fix the issues. So, most novice programs, when you look at their structure, when you look at what they are, they tend to be a medley of compound movements. And the reason why is compound movements are the best movements for hypertrophy and strength gains because they involve the most muscles. That is across the board accepted and valid. Issue is, of course, they tend to fall into the mindset of more is better, and therefore all they offer is compound movements, and you cannot make a program with only compound movements. That being said, it is true that for novices, people who have no adaptation, who have no real experience in the gym, it's not the worst to just focus on that. Because you can't have a noob spend 2 hours in the gym. You want them to come in, do 2 to 3 movements, and then go home. That's perfectly understandable, and that's what I also suggest for novices. But what ends up happening with novice programs is they take that idea to the grave, and that's when all of the issues arise. So that's the broad panorama of novice programs. When you have to name one, of course, there's strong lifts, there is starting strength. I think starting strength might be the most well known because its creator, Mark Rippetoe, is a very charismatic man in his own ways, and he's made a brand out of the program. And that's how you actually make money out of something. You turn it into a myth, into a legend. And he's managed to do that. To the point that if you go on any image board, if you go on YouTube Fitness and you ask, hey, I'm a complete novice, what program should I jump on? There's a 75% chance someone is going to say SS for starting strength. And the issue is, and I've made a review of starting strength, so you should already know that if you've watched the video, starting strength is not a good novice program. And in comparison to other novice programs out there, it is, because the rest is actually downright terrible and trash. But as a standalone program, I'm going to show you that it stands on very thin legs and that actually has hurt more people than it helped. So, I also need to talk about the target audience of these programs, which are novices. Novices are the biggest portion of YouTube Fitness. I mean, I'm going to eyeball it and say that 90% of people on this platform are novices. And the tricky part too is that it's not always the same people because there's a very fast rotation, there's a very fast turnover rate of novices because they come and go. A novice either becomes an intermediate and leaves the pool of novices, or they quit and they just disappear. And sometimes these people come back repeatedly because they train for 6 months, they give up, they regress back to novice status, then they enter again, they progress, etc., etc. I've known people who've been novices for 5 years because the second they are about to graduate from the stage, they quit. And it's an issue that I'm going to mention also because it's, for the most part, the program's fault. So, these are the people we're talking about. These are people who are complete normies, they know nothing about training, they buy into all of the bullshit, they buy into all of the nonsense, and they need to be guided. And novice programs actually tend to do that very well, too well actually. So that's the beast we're dealing with. It's, for the most part, people who know nothing, and that's fine because they're getting started. But they know nothing and they jump into a novice program, and that's when the issue arises. So, a big pet peeve of mine with any programs, not just the novice programs, is the strange attachment that the creator has to it, which is the reason why they give it their name. A lot of people give their actual, birth name to their program, and they defend it teeth and nail, where it's like it's their baby. And the issue with that mindset is that it stops being just a production, it stops just being a creation, it becomes a creature, and it becomes sentient. And that's a big problem. Because what you see happen every single time with these is that there's a cult following that starts developing, and there's a mindset that starts also growing and just nurturing itself, that any gains you will make off of this program is thanks to the creator, which of course is complete nonsense. A program is just a list of lifts that have existed for longer than the guy was alive, arranged in a certain pattern to have volume, intensity, and frequency create something that is actually called tonnage at the end. That's nothing special. It's not thanks to the person who made the program you made those gains, it's thanks to you. And the problem too with these same individuals is that they fail to realize and they fail to actually admit that the same novice would have made the similar gains or even better gains on a different program, because everything works for novices. And the issue is that I see too many people say that, but they don't apply it in practice. Because most people say everything works for novices, therefore we can just do them whatever. Well, no, since everything works in terms of results, we need to have them do certain things, and that's going to come into play later in my argument. And the dogmatism that you see attached to that also is spreading, and it's damaging to the individual's mindset, because the person who created the program is going to credit themselves for the gains of anyone who is going to jump on the program, which is already a problem. But then they're also going to ask that same person to have allegiance to the program. And you might think, okay, but no one's going to do that. Well, actually, everyone does that. Have you ever tried criticizing a novice program on YouTube Fitness? People become ravenous. And the argument that you hear is, oh, millions of people have used it and they've made good gains. Okay, but that has nothing to do with quality. It has everything to do with seniority. Just because the program was their first doesn't make it good. Most of the old novice programs are garbage compared to what we do nowadays because they're old. But because they're old, they have developed, again, as I explained, that legendary status where people look at it through pink tinted glasses and they're so emotionally attached to it that they fail to realize that it's not that great. If you look at it objectively, it's not that great. And so to be able to fully and accurately assess novice programs, I'm personally going to detach the emotional portion of it, the anciency of it, because just because something is ancient doesn't mean it's good. Traditions are good until they're not. And the issue with novice programs is that it's a tradition that we've outgrown as a community, so we need to let go of the old ones. Now, diving straight into the big issues, the big problems of novice programs that I almost hear no one talk about, but that are just plain to see for the naked eye. The first one is the insane obsession on progression. The program wants you to progress at any cost, and it is designed to make you progress. And you might say, well, that's a good thing. You want novices to progress, don't you? Well, yeah, but again, anything works for novices. They're going to progress regardless. So why are you bombarding them with the same movements again and again and again, and you try to make them stack the plates on top of the bar as fast as possible. This makes training into a race. And then you have those people who are going to have little ego wars and they say, oh, I put 160 pounds on my squat the first year. What did you put on the bar? And it's like, who cares? It doesn't matter, you're a novice. What, great, you went from squatting 60 pounds to now 200. That's not an accomplishment. It's a given that you would eventually be able to do that. And the problem is that novices are speedy. They want to do everything fast. They want fast gains, they want fast results, which is the reason why YouTube Fitness is an endless shitfest of people who say, oh, great results in 3 weeks, in 2 days, which is nonsense, of course. But it doesn't teach the most important thing to novices, which is patience. It teaches them rather that they need to progress as fast as possible, because if they don't, their noob gains are going to be out the window. The issue is that when that happens, it creates a mindset of, I need to get everything I can now because I won't be able to get it later, which is not true. I made a video about noob gains. Noob gains are not that magical switch that activate itself the second you pick up a weight and then you have like 3 hours and then they're gone. Noob gains represent a certain amount of muscular development until you reach a point where it's going to become strikingly more difficult to continue. That's it. You can ride noob gains for 5 years if you're just really lazy or if you just really sandbag. It's just going to be a waste of time, but it's possible. So it needs to be ingrained in the mind of novices that it's not a race. The goal is not to see who's going to be the strongest. It's going to be who's going to stick to it for the longest time. So that's important. You also see a lot of injuries with that type of program because they are highly repetitive. And the biggest culprit of that is, of course, the big three, which is being spammed to novices. And I'm a big proponent of the big three. If you look at my training footage, that's all I do. I do deadlift, squat, and I do bench. I do a standard bench, I do a high bar squat, and I do a conventional deadlift with a closed stance. I'm the picture perfect powerlifting fanboy, and yet I'm not a powerlifter. It's just that those lifts fit. They work for me. They've always worked for me. For some people, they won't. Take some guy who's 6'6", he's going to suck at the conventional, his bench is going to be tragic because of the length of the range of motion, and he's not going to be able to high bar squat. So what do you tell that guy? Well, just go home, stop lifting. No, you give them option. Maybe they can do dips. Maybe they can do a low bar squat. Maybe they can do some sumo instead. But the problem with most novice programs is that they don't like that. They want you to stay within the little box because they say that this is the best box. And they also have the balls to say that if you don't fit in the box, then you are the problem, not the novice program. Well, the issue is that the program adapts to the lifter, not the other way around. And novice programs, for the most part, are one size fits all. And that is just not correlated with reality and how it works in the real world for real lifters. So it's just going to be something that is going to pander to the common denominator, the person who's a standard size, and is going to completely ignore the other sides of the spectrum. That is no good. And I think this is also attached to a mindset that I've seen in older lifters where they just cannot accept the fact that there is something better outside of what they've done. Where I have read from people who I respected, older lifters that I looked up to, things like, oh, if you can't do conventional, don't do sumo, like it's conventional or nothing. And those are like guys who are 5'7", what do they know? Telling that to some giants, but they still do it. And because they have the crowd behind them who says, oh, your Novice program was the best, I put on 40 pounds. They get to do it because they have the appeal, they have the legendary status. But that is idolization, it needs to be destroyed. You can look at a program without looking at the name of the person who made it and know if it's good or not. And the last part is, it rushes you to plateaus. I think it's the biggest offender, it's the biggest issue. A novice program, for example, starting strength, is going to have you run face first into the wall, where it's actually within the program that it wants you to plateau as fast as possible, because it thinks that when you plateau, it means that you've reached a limit. And that now it means that you can start thinking about moving up to intermediate, or that you're going to have to be able to implement the very smart strategies of deloads that are going to help you break the plateau, which I've covered in a previous video. These methods are stupid. The issue is that those novice programs start to realize that maybe the plateau comes so soon because you failed to accumulate quality volume beforehand, and therefore when you meet it, it's just this impregnable fortress that you cannot breach. And the problem is, and I'll put the video in the description because it's a different topic, I don't want to get back into that, but most of these novice programs use 5x5s, 3x5s, and 3x3, which are static rep ranges, which don't promote progression, or at least not to break plateaus. Because since you're always going to have to repeat these, let's say 1 week you got the 5x5 and it was a struggle. There is no way you're getting another 5x5 next time, because it means that for 5 different sets, you're going to have a PR on each different iteration of the set for the same amount of reps. This makes no sense. It makes sense when we're talking about a novice that progresses so fast that they're going to be able to magically make it. But the problem is that once that progression stops, once the noob gains disappear, it's going to be hell. Because most of those novice programs don't have the honesty to recognize that, hey, yes, I have a built-in plateau in my programming, in my rep ranges. You're going to plateau hard, and it's my fault. This is what you do when it happens. For the most part, they tend to avoid that altogether, or, as I explained, they just have a psychology and mindset of saying, oh, just lower the weight and just redo the same linear thing and hope that this time it works. It doesn't. That's the reason why so many people quit, but I'll get to that later. So that's my big problems with novice programs nowadays, the way they work. They just don't understand that novices need to take things slow. Because if you look at it on a spectrum, who progresses the fastest? Novices. Who progresses the least? Advanced lifters. So in terms of chronology, who should be rushing? The guys at the end of the spectrum. Why? Because the amount of time you're going to spend as a novice is minuscule if you stick to it. You're going to train for 20 years. You'll be a novice for like 6 months. Why are you rushing those 6 months? You could expand them to a year. It doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things. It's not going to make the other parts any shorter, but it might actually make them a little bit easier because you're going to have accumulated good practices there and you won't have plateaued as much. So I'm going to explain how to do that. But another big thing is the psychological component of novice programs, which tend to shame lifters with standards. And I'll make a full video on standards because it's a different beast also, but standards are useless. Like right off the bat, size and strength standards are completely worthless. And it breaks my heart when I see people over-focus on them. Where I see people in my comment ask, oh, when am I going to reach a 4-plate deadlift? Well, I don't know. It depends entirely on the way you program. Do you want to rush to a 4-plate deadlift and deadlift it with a cat back and hurt yourself? Or do you want to actually grow as you do it? In which case, you're going to have to do more reps. Those are questions that need to be asked. The novice programs don't ask those questions. They just think, okay, you see this goal? This is what you're going to shoot for. Like, go full throttle. Don't worry about what happens to your body. Just get that goal. And once you get it, you'll finally be intermediate. Cool. Do I get a medal in the mail? Do I get a check from the IRS? I don't think so. Nothing happens. It's just an ego drive. It's an ego boost that you can finally say, I'm not a novice anymore. But guess what? 100% of people who start lifting would have graduated from the novice status regardless at some point. So why do you try to do it fast? Again, enjoy those novice years. Enjoy those novice moments where everything is brand new and fresh. Don't disgust yourself from the practice by trying to get out of that as soon as possible. If I were to become poetic, I would compare the novice stage to childhood. It's the moment where you're carefree, you have very few responsibilities, the world is magical, anything you do works, everything bends to your will because you are a protected class, and you should enjoy that. Don't try to grow up too fast. You want to be the guy who pays the bills? Don't be the guy who pays the bills. Enjoy being a novice. You'll be an intermediate soon enough, and it's going to suck. So enjoy that childhood. And the second thing is, because it shames lifters, some lifters who cannot meet those insane standards because they don't have the leverage or they are just skinny, bulk and look at starting strength. I mean, a lot of people try to defend the practice and they say, oh, but GOMAD is only for very skinny guys. Okay, but GOMAD is still bad even for very skinny guys because it's a garbage way to get in macros. It's stupid. And it also promotes that idea of going fast. Fast, fast. put on pounds, or we don't care about the quality of the pounds, just get bigger and squat 4 plates. Why? It makes no sense. Why? Why are you trying to bulk up to a stage where you're going to look completely unaesthetic just to be able to put more plates on the bar? That's not right. It's not. It promotes a garbage mindset, and I can tell you that a lot of people developed body dysmorphia from that. And to sort of end that description of the programs and its issues, I would say it both manages to be cultish yet amateurish, where it's a bunch of people who praise it as being the second coming of Jesus and the best thing after a slice of bread, and yet they know nothing, right? They have no notions of programming. They can't explain to you why the program is good. When you tell them the program is bad because X and Y, they're just going to retreat back to the fanboyism and say, oh, but millions of people made gains. Well, millions of people could make gains lifting rocks and climbing trees. Does it make it the best way to train? Nope. You cannot, and anyone who does it actually is dishonest and needs to be ignored. You cannot claim the effectiveness of compound movements to yourself. You didn't invent that. You're not the creator of the laws of physics that make it so that a bench press is going to make the chest grow. You just can't. It's dishonest. It's deeply dishonest. And yet, you have guys who try to preposterously pretend that they invented rep ranges. Like, you invented 5x5. You slapped two numbers with a multiplication in the middle. Wow. Are you Pythagoras? Are you his in direct line of ancestry? It's crazy also that no one challenges that. It's like, any good program is going to be a medley of compound movements and isolation. But I'll get to that because Novice Programs fail at that. But before I move on to the next stage, I also want to say that, as I just explained, compound movements are great for novices. I'm not saying that. If you look at my programs, they're full of compound movements. It's always at least 80%. But novices don't need to do so much compound movements because it's not a race. You don't have to have someone squat 3 times a week. They don't have to bench 3 times a week. You can take it slow, and I'll get to that when I talk about the way I program. But first, let's check the time. Nice. Okay, so next step is the fact that, as I just explained with the isolation, those programs tend to be full of holes, meaning that they are lacking in many aspects when it comes to actually proposing a decent training split to the trainee, where there is a high focus on the big three and not much else. Like, you see some rows, you see some pull-ups, but where are the calf raises, where are the curls, where are the tricep extensions, where are the neck work, where is the forearm isolation, where is the core work, the direct core work, where is the GPP? All of that is kaput. And you might say, well, it's because, again, novices need to focus on a small amount of thing. Yeah, but if you just slashed like 20%, you could replace that 20% by something else, by more diversity. And that would make the program so much better because, as I said before, the repetitive nature of novice programs is also responsible for the reason why a lot of people quit. At some point, going to the gym and doing bench squat and deadlift all the time gets boring. It does. I trained this way. First off, it wasn't that great for hypertrophy because it lacked variation and rotations. And two, at some point, it's like, I'm not even enjoying what I'm doing. What am I doing this? Just to get big because everyone did it before? There are other ways. You can get big with any movement pattern. You don't need to stick to what you don't like. So, the way I personally program for novices and the way you can see when you visit my novice program. If you approach my novice program, and I have had people on this channel do that, with the eyes and the mindset of someone who just went and just lifted on starting strength or bases their understanding of novice programs off of the ancient dinosaurs of YouTube fitness. You would think, wow, this is nothing. Like, there's not enough volume for the bench. They barely squat. They squat once or twice a week. Only one time deadlift. Why? Why do you do that? What is the point? This is not right. Right? A lot of people will tell me it's not right. And to that I answer, why? Why would it not be right? Wouldn't a novice make progress on this? Don't you think a novice would progress squatting 2 times a week? They would. They totally would. And I'm also going to argue that in the long run, the guy who squats 2 times a week is going to be more consistent than the guy who does it 3 times and is going to be able to outdo him in the long term. But of course, If you think about the novice phase as something that you need to rush through as soon as possible and as fast as possible, yes, the guy who squats more is going to be out of the novice phase earlier, but is he going to make it longer in the game? No. So my idea when I program for novices is I give them just enough. I give them just enough to keep them interested in the lifting. Okay, I want them to get a taste for it, because when I started lifting, my lifting sessions were 20 minutes of push-ups, sit-ups, and some air squats. That's it. That's it. And I know that if I had done more, I would have burnt out. I needed to be able to rope myself in. I needed the results and the sport to seduce me in a way. And the problem is that novice programs are, as I said, one size fits all. So it's just throwing something at the novice and saying, all right, if it sticks, and if it doesn't, screw you. It cannot be this way. We're losing too many people who could have been quality additions to the community. So we need to give them movement patterns that are going to be, in the long run, building a solid base, but a plurality of them, and enough that they are still tantalized by it. If you make the novice deadlift once a week, I can tell you that he's going to be so excited to get back in the gym next week and get that PR. Of course, because it's going to be fun. It's going to be like, yeah, I get that one time a week to deadlift, I'm going to deadlift. They're not going to skip. And that's a big problem with novices too, is that we have to prevent those idiots from skipping. And I said, knowing that when I started, I would try and skip, but I didn't have a choice. I would have to do it because it wasn't so bad after all. I would just tell myself, oh, I'll get through it. It's just once a week. It's once a week with 3 iterations. I'll be fine. And that connects to a meme, an argument, a logical fallacy that I hear a ton on YouTube Fitness. People who say, oh, if progressive overload was always the same as in the novice stage, we would all be lifting thousands of pounds. It's first off, it doesn't make me laugh because I've been hearing it for 5 years now, but there's actually a hidden truth behind it. Yes, if you could add the weight that you add on the novice program all the way to the end of your lifting career, you would be lifting 5,000 pounds on the deadlift. But you can't. Why? Because the weight jumps and the frequency of the times where you can add weight is being reduced with time. It's exponentially smaller. What does that tell you? It tells you that maybe that crazy increase at the start that was promoted by the noob gains isn't so good after all. Maybe if we reduce it, we'll be able to create more consistency and we're going to be able to carry over that progression for longer. That's my point and that's my case. Keep in mind also that a lot of novices who fall for the bulking meme, the dirty bulk meme, the GoMat plus SS meme, they think they're getting bigger. They think they're building muscle, but they're just getting fatter. I don't care if you put on 200 pounds on your squat. If you also gained 200 pounds, it's worthless. And that's never mentioned. Maintenance is never mentioned, even though, in my opinion, the people who benefit the most and who can get the most results from maintenance are novices. You can just stay at the same calories and just slowly increase it with time as your appetite grows. You'll see muscle growth. And I don't think that it's far-fetched to say that it's not going to make your gains any more relevant. As long as you are at maintenance or with a good surplus, a slight surplus, you'll be fine. You don't need to enter a crazy 500 calories plus surplus on your diet. It's a waste of time. And in reality, it's going to discourage you because the gains on the bar are not going to result in gains in the mirror. And that can be heartbreaking. So to get back to programming for novices, the way I do it bodybuilding centric, which means I will always prefer introducing the novice to more movement patterns, ones that are not technically taught to novices, like curls, like elbow flexions, so that they can actually get a taste for it and they can actually be doing it later on in their program. Across the board, that's always the way I'm going to rock. I don't care if you don't progress as fast on the bench. You're going to plateau on the bench eventually, and you know that. Unless you're going to crazy bulk, there's going to be a time where you plateau. Why don't you just wait for that plateau to come? Maybe we are going to be able to delay that plateau for 4 months. At the end of the day, you still made the same progression with more additional volume and tonnage, and you got more upper body volume from the rest of the accessories. That's the way I think, because to me, that's how you keep bodybuilding going. And now we're going to get into why. Because novice programs are powerlifting centric. All of them. And I don't say that to say that it's because they are using powerlifting movements, which are the compound movements, because compound movements also belong to bodybuilders. Bodybuilders didn't invent it. Bodybuilders in the 50s were already using compound movements. It's also ours. You know what? I'm reclaiming them. This deadlift is not a powerlifting movement, it's a movement. It's amazing for hypertrophy. Don't let people talk you out of doing that. It blows my mind because every single time I post a video where I lift heavy, quote unquote, I see people in the comments say, oh, he's doing strength training now. Nope. A 2-rep max on the deadlift is not strength training, it's hypertrophy. Because I do it for the purpose of hypertrophy. Yes, strength and size are different values, but guess what? They are intertwined. If you want to develop one, you're going to have to develop the other to an extent. So retake that for yourself too. You get to live like this as a bodybuilder. Don't just do machines, you will get nowhere. And I will make a full video on the powerlifting versus bodybuilding on YouTube Fitness, so I don't want to spoil too much, but yes, I will explain why YouTube Fitness is powerlifting centric because it's actually a very interesting story. And there's a big target audience dissonance with the Novice Programs too, because a lot of people who start lifting, they don't start lifting for strength. They start lifting for aesthetics. They want to look better. And the issue is that the only thing available for them is Novice programs that are highly focused on powerlifting. And none of these programs actually say it. They don't come out and say, I'm trying to mold you into a powerlifter. But that's what they do. They groom you to become a powerlifter because they're training you in a way that is highly skewed towards making you a better lifter on the big three, which is why if you look at my Novice program, there's variations of the bench squat and deadlift because I don't need to feed the specificity aspect so much because I'm not so focused on the progression aspect. So that's important to keep in mind. This is the reason why these programs need to be rethinked because they're not a good fit for everyone, not at all. But they have resulted in what I can only call a mental health crisis on YouTube Fitness, where there is a big portion of the powerlifting community on YouTube Fitness, which I want to call full powerlifters, meaning that these people are sucked in, and my voice is going for some reason. Those people are sucked in early, and for them, the problem that happened for them is that they never even got a chance to express their desires. They go told, no, you're gonna be strong. And the problem is that they didn't have a way out, so they became strong. But they resented because what they wanted was size and shreds and good looks. But now they're just a powerlifter, I guess, and therefore they don't have a true, genuine love for strength. And they also have a deep, bitter resentment in their gut for people who look good. And these are some of the most toxic people on YouTube Fitness. And I think it's powerlifters' job to call them out and to tell them, hey, you don't represent me. You don't love strength. You have no respect for the iron. Just you're a gremlin. Don't talk in my name. But that's a different discussion. Now, I spoke about novices giving up. It's quite important because out of the 90% of novices, we lose a good chunk of them. Almost no one makes it to intermediate. And the reason why is all of the reasons I just explained. Hidden reasons that are never expressed out loud that make the novice think that they're failing because of them and not the program. And you hear that on YouTube Fitness a ton. People who say, oh, it's not the program, it's you. Yeah, to an extent, because if you're a complete bum and you don't eat and you don't sleep and you barely train and you skip training, yeah, it's your fault. But if you've been sticking to it and you are under obvious injuries, plateaus, and just that repetitive nature that makes you want to quit, that's not really your fault. It's just that you're a novice. You don't have the discipline yet. And you've been jumping and you've been basically forced to jump in on a program that requires high discipline because it's minimalistic and highly repetitive in nature. So we need to save novices from that. We need to free them. Now, and I'm going to finish on this because this is all I have for you guys today. My big not necessarily problem, but the underlying issue that comes with all of what I just described is that novice programs don't promote programming. And that sounds counterintuitive because isn't it a program? Yeah, it's a program, but it's also a program that tells the person who jumps on it, hey, don't modify anything, don't modify the lifts, don't modify the rep range, just do that. And if you can't make progress on this, then you suck. What type of mindset is that? It's a garbage mindset is what it is. And the problem is that even for the few, some people make it, some people make great gains off of Novice Program, and then they continue on and they become good in the long term. Problem is, they don't know anything about programming, which is why you hear so many people say, oh, the transition to novice, from novice to intermediate was hell. Yeah, because you don't know what you're doing. If you could have just modified the novice program with evolving rep ranges, with a few variations and rotations, it would have been peach. You know why? Because you would have already created the program that would have made it for you through intermediate stages and carry you through that stage before you even graduated from the novice stage. That's how you program. I have videos on that in the programming playlist. Please check them out if you're a novice. This is the way to go for programmation and for long-term muscle gains. And I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.